You know, it is a well-worn historical axiom that the party out of power always gains seats in the first midterm election of a new presidency. Only twice since the Civil War has the sitting president's party gained seats in Congress in the first election after that president was elected. In politics, this is just one of those things you can set your watch to. And this year, this axiom, this historical truth, probably means very good things for Republicans come November. It means they are poised to gain lots of seats in the next election. Democrats know it, and so do Republicans.
We will take back the majority in the House. This country is very much desirous of a new direction.
Seats. Can you do it?
We've got 100 seats in play. We have a real shot at winning the majority. So that we can put a check on this administration and all the spending that's out of control here in Washington, D.C.
100 seats in play. We're going to take back the majority. You know, that could very well be true. History very much on Republican side. If you are the party out of power, as Republicans are now, you're sort of counting on buyer's remorse from voters in the first midterm election. I mean, as long as people aren't riding unicorns down a rainbow to work every day, as long as things aren't perfect in the country, any dissatisfaction about the way things are going is likely to be channeled into a loss in seats for the folks who are in charge. If the election is a referendum on the guy who just got elected president and on his party. Now, on the other hand, what if the election isn't a referendum on the guy who just got elected president and his party? What if the election isn't a referendum, but rather a choice? Not just a thumbs up or thumbs down on Democrats, but a choice between what the Democrats are offering and what Republicans have to offer. That seems to be the possibility that is keeping Republicans and conservatives up nights right now. Democrats, of course, are showing what they stand for better or for worse, by how they're governing. Republicans can show what they're against by voting no on Democratic ideas. But when it comes to Republicans showing what they're for, well, when you're in the minority, that is harder to get across. And right now, it seems harder for Republicans to figure out. Republicans have made a bunch of efforts in the last year to nail down exactly what it is they want to tell the American people they stand for. Remember the pizza party that Eric Cantor and Mitt Romney hosted last year? That was supposed to be the kickoff for the Republican Party's new National Council for a New America. The plan was for Republicans to travel around the country soliciting ideas from average Americans. Eric Cantor pulled the plug on that big idea last month after holding just one pizza event in the whole year. One little pizza party. Then there was this idea soliciting effort from House Republicans, americaspeakingout.com, an online forum for Americans to provide new ideas for the Republican Party platform. As the Associated Press noted this weekend, that effort is also not bearing much fruit for Republicans. If you go to the Liberty and Freedom page, for example, right now, you can see that the top suggested ideas are, please protect my right to play poker, and eliminate don't ask, don't tell. Also, keep the Republicans out of our bedrooms, and ban handguns, and drop the idea that we're a Christian country. Think the Republican Party is ready to run with those ideas? From americaspeakingout.com, their big ideas generator? Then there was You Cut, the House Republican project to let the American people literally set the legislative agenda for Republicans. People would vote online on what federal spending programs should be cut. Then House Republicans would propose those cuts, thereby slashing federal spending by 0.017%. The anti-spending Cato Institute here ridiculing House Republicans in for their effort to exchange their own initiative, their own leadership, for a meaningless social media gimmick. Then there was the Mount Vernon statement, a grandiose, fake parchment-y looking thing that conservatives signed onto as their statement of constitutional conservatism for the 21st century, endorsing things like the rule of law and individual liberty, and opposing tyranny in the world, and the defense of family, neighborhood, community, and faith. In other words, such generic I love my mama platitudes that even a pinko commie liberal elite infidel like me would be happy signing on to all but one paragraph of the whole Mount Vernon statement. And if I fit into your definition of conservative, your definition of conservative is probably broken. It's one thing to have the luxury to work out your principles in the abstract, to have your pizza parties and your parchment-y statements that talk about love in America and hating foreign aid or whatever. It's all well and good until what you want government to do actually gets put to the test. Like, say, when a giant, totally unforeseen catastrophe happens, like what is happening right now in the Gulf. The biggest environmental disaster ever in our country, plainly and inarguably caused by an oil company screwing up. It's exposed deep rifts and deep disagreements among conservatives, among Republicans, about what to do and why.
I apologize. I do not want to live in a country where any time a citizen or a corporation does something that is legitimately wrong is subject to some sort of political pressure that is, again, in my words, amounts to a shakedown. So I apologize.
The ranking Republican on the House Energy Committee, the face of energy policy for the Republican Party, Joe Barton. He later unapologized. He retracted that apology. But his apology and then his unapologies set off kind of a rift within the Republican Party. Those who agree with Joe Barton that BP has gotten hosed, they're the aggrieved party here, and those who don't agree.
So I couldn't disagree with Joe Barton more. BP doesn't need an apology. They need to apologize to us.
I think Joe Barton was spot on when he called it a shakedown. I think the leverage brought on Joe Barton by, I'll say, the conference was unjust. I think he should have been able to stand there and let his remarks stand.
Couldn't be more wrong. Couldn't be more wrong. The statement that Representative Barton made was wrong, absolutely wrong. He has since apologized for it.
It seems to me there's a misreading of the Constitution and a misunderstanding of jurisdictional limits from this White House. Now it seems that it's all about extortion.
Republicans at war with each other right now over whether or not BP has been treated unfairly. And more broadly, on what counts as a conservative response to this environmental disaster. On the one hand, you have Republicans like Adam Putnam of Florida and Aaron Schock of Illinois introducing legislation, they say, to toughen up government regulation of the oil industry. Then on the other hand, you have Republicans like candidate Randy Brogdon. He's running for governor in Oklahoma. He tells the Associated Press, quote, "This oil spill is a perfect example of why government should never be involved in the private sector. Government is not the solution. It's the problem. The more government tries to get in and regulate the free market, the worse things become." Mr. Brogdon apparently trying to get elected on the Don't Blame BP platform, set the oil companies free. Leave BP alone. This is a moment when Republicans ought to be sailing toward huge political victory. They are poised to win lots of congressional seats this year. But in a year when they've had enough trouble trying to get people to turn to them for answers in the abstract, now looking to them for answers on this very specific, deadly, pressing, ongoing problem may have changed the whole course of politics for this midterm year. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. Chris, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Great to be here, Rachel.
So as Republicans try to figure out if they're with BP or against them, is one faction within the party winning? Is somebody gaining the upper hand?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting how it shakes out. I mean, basically, you had the Barton apology, then you had this tremendous amount of, quote, leverage, as King put it, brought to bear by the congressional leadership of the Republican Party, and then you had a backlash to that from the kind of the talkers. I mean, you had Mark Levin on his radio show going after Bill O'Reilly because Bill O'Reilly has been on the kind of BP bashing side of this equation. And then you had a lot of stuff I've been reading all day on the internet saying, stick up for BP and this is overreach by the president. So I don't think it's shaken out yet. I think to the extent there's a divide, it's between the people that are at the core center of the partisan power, right? The Republican congressional leadership who are worried about midterm results. They need to elect Republicans, and the people who are clearly part of the conservative movement who are not as invested in picking up seats the way that, say, the Republican committee is.
Well, as people like Rush Limbaugh and other movement conservatives like you're describing, as they, for lack of a better construction, as they take BP's side here, the White House are thugs for cracking down on them and all that. It just makes me wonder, are there any important recent instances of the Republican leadership really siding against the Rush Limbaughs, really saying, actually, no, right, Rush is wrong here?
No, and in fact, what we've seen is quite the opposite, right? There was this long run. I mean, there's a series of events last year where people would criticize Rush and then they would be marched out in a kind of sort of Stalinist manner before the cameras to offer their official recantations for going against the party line, literally. So no one tends to cross them because the power of the conservative movement is in the media infrastructure, I think, as much as it is in the actual elected leadership. This is, I think, possibly a breaking point because it's just such terrible politics. And that's, I mean, the knee-jerk reaction of Mitch McConnell and Murkowski and the leadership on the Hill was right. I mean, they realized that Barton, prostrating himself before British Petroleum after they're, spilling up maybe 100,000 barrels of oil into the Gulf is just crazy, crazy, terrible optics for them. So it might be a breaking point, but there is no precedent for it up until now.
Well, at this point, this far out from the election, it seems like what Democrats ought to be trying to do is to split conservatives from Republicans, to split Republicans from their own base. At this point, you're not worried about targeting independents who don't follow politics all that closely. That sort of comes later. At this point, you're trying to sort of fracture their base. And so isn't it sort